Because so scary, like even with some of my friends back at home, because I'm originally from Adelaide,
Yep.
I was like, oh man, I haven't like seen and broed out with them for a long period of time, and I get a little bit scared of being like, when I'm telling them about all my wins and my success and all the things that are happening, I'm like, oh God, I get a little bit nervous like thinking about it. So. Danny, thanks for coming on my show and hosting me in your podcast studio.
Yeah, not a problem, mate. I'm stoked to be on your show. Thanks for the setup here. It's brilliant.
Yeah, dude, it's so cool. I'm actually really interested and really intrigued as to like why you actually started your podcast, because like you were just like talking beforehand, I was like, I haven't met anyone else that's sort of like gone in, competed, now into personal development, crushes the mindset stuff, and has their own podcast. And by the way, everyone, if you haven't heard of Danny before, he's got like 456, I think, episodes on his podcast. Insane. Go to check it out. But yeah, like what got you into podcasting and how has it served you?
Well, firstly, as you just mentioned, I'm also pumped to be chatting and connecting with you today, because we do have very similar journeys, and I've been watching your content from afar for a while now. So it's cool that it's all aligned and we can chat today. But for me with the podcast, I'd gone down the path of competing, and I was obviously obsessed with health and fitness for some time before the podcast, and I'd started dabbling with YouTube and vlogging and whatnot, and I was putting in a lot of effort with the YouTube side of things, and as you would know, it's very hard to crack into any real engagement on YouTube and build an audience on there, but I was really enjoying it. And at that stage, I'd started listening to the likes of Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, and I'd really started stepping into the personal development space, not so much from sharing it with my audience or anything, but more so just myself. I'd really started to lean into mindset and not just the physical side of pushing all the time. And I think it was either Gary Vee or Grant Cardone had said in this episode that, well, obviously Gary talks about, follow where the attention is. And at that stage, podcasting wasn't really a thing in Australia anyway, particularly in the fitness space. So I thought, you know what, I may as well just put a lot of my knowledge and my content into a podcast and see if I can get in early, because I knew that with the YouTube side of things, if you were in early, it was much easier than trying to jump in when it was super saturated. So I was listening to Grant Cardone's audiobook, The 10X Rule, and he mentioned something in there around the lines of like, don't wait until tomorrow to do something that can be done today. And at that point, I'd had in my notes on my phone like a plan for a podcast, and I'd mapped out, what style the episodes would be, the name of the show, all this type of stuff. And I'd had it in there for about 3 months. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I went on Google, typed in how to start a podcast, and the top blog that came up was really insightful. I wish I remember what it was, because that was the reason I started the show. But I followed step by step how to start a show. I went and bought it was like $99 for this USB mic. And I had my Mac, and I recorded 3 episodes that day. They were absolutely fucking horrendous. and I didn't really know what I was doing. I remember, I tell this story all the time, like when we record now, I absolutely love podcasting and super relaxed with it. And, I'm very much showing my own personality in the podcast now. But at the start, I would have the whole episode written in my notes, and I'd be sitting in my room, like trying to read it as if I was making it up on the spot, and just like also getting stuck with reading, and it was just a disaster. But by the end of that first day, I had submitted the podcast to iTunes, to Apple, sorry. I'd made some cover art on Canva, I think, at the time. And that was that. I kind of committed then to putting out at least 1 episode every single week. And that's how it all began. And because it was such a untapped space in Australia in particular, it was quite easy to get guests on the show, because people kind of like, what the fuck's a podcast? Like, yeah, sure, I'll come on. And I'm like, all right, cool. I won't tell you that we only get like 10 downloads, but no worries. But yeah, so that was the start of it. And then since then, I put out at least 1 episode every single week, and it's kind of just evolved from there.
That is crazy. What did you think you were going to get out of it? Like when you first started podcasting, like, did you think you were going to get something, or were you intentionally just being like, we're just sharing a good vibe?
There wasn't really any intention of what I was going to get out of it. The whole purpose was, I felt like I had knowledge that could help a lot of people, and I was pushing it on Instagram, I was pushing it on YouTube, and just not really seeing the reward for effort in terms of engagement. But I knew what I had inside could help a lot of people. So I just thought, I'm just going to build this. And at the time, I just started listening to Russ, the rapper Russ. I don't know if you know.
I know Russ. Yeah, I actually do, yeah.
And, a lot of his story and the reason why he's successful is because he started in a very similar way, like putting songs on SoundCloud, getting fuck all listens, but building up his catalog and building up the consistency and putting out good music and good content as much as possible, knowing that when it gained traction, he had a massive catalog of songs for people to listen to. So I came into it with the same mindset. I thought, you know what, at some point podcasting is going to blow up and more people are going to start to listen to it. So if I just keep adding episodes with good, valuable content over time, when people do eventually find the podcast, which is inevitable, there's going to be a lot of gold there for people to find. And that's what I kind of clung, if that's a word, clung onto for the first 1 to 2 years. Like, it had a little bit of initial growth, which felt like growth at the time because it went from 0 to maybe say 400 to 500 downloads a month. And then it hit a sticking point for probably 12 to 18 months. And in that period, when I look back at it now, I'm so happy and so proud of myself for sticking with it and consistently putting out episodes, because without that, the show wouldn't be where it is today.
And do you think that like working through fitness and like competing and everything else like help with that?
100%.
Yeah.
You and I were chatting before we hit record today around the lessons you take away from competing and the discipline and the drive and that hard work that we put in terms of changing our physique and understanding that it all comes down to the work you do or don't put in. So I think that definitely helped, and just the consistency. But it just kept coming back to me knowing that when I started my fitness journey in particular, because the podcast did start more so fitness based and not as much business and mindset. Starting my journey, I would go to absolutely any source of information that I could to try and see how to eat, how to train, how to recover. And I just thought, if I had someone who had the knowledge that I feel like I have now, being able to share that with me, my journey would have been much easier and smoother. So I just thought, if at least one person listens to every episode and takes value from it, and I still hold that mentality to this day, then I'm doing my job.
Yeah, I remember having that thought, like the exact same thought, like going through starting my podcast as well. That's like amazing. One thing you touched on beforehand was personality.
Yep.
And like, hey, like I can like show my personality through now, like express it. But at the start, I found it like really difficult. What was sort of for you?
So did I, man.
Yeah. Well, what for you were the things that helped you actually be able to break through and show your personality? Because there's usually some stories there, some sticky parts where it's like, you had to do something or be part of something or whatever it is, so you can actually be like,
yeah,
I could be me. You know what I mean? Do you have any stories?
Yeah, it's a pretty funny one. Well, before I even mention that story, I think, I was fortunate to start right from day one with Keep It Clean and with Steph and Laura with their app, and that kind of threw me straight in front of cameras and filming workouts and talking to a bigger audience. As I mentioned, I'd been doing vlogging on YouTube, which I think is scary as fuck initially, and it really gets you comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. Like, for example, walking through a supermarket, videoing yourself, and you've got like people looking at you thinking, what the fuck's going on here? So I think that confidence built just gradually over time. And I always talk about, the best way to build confidence is through action and not talking about action. But for me, I remember I was in Las Vegas and I'd had a few cocktails and I was sticking true to the one episode per week, and I was like, I haven't recorded one yet, so I need to record something. I was up in my hotel room and I'd started recording this solo episode, and I was a bit pissed already. Let's be honest.
It's like a Sunday night or something. Like,
it was just during the day, which probably
now.
makes it worse. To be honest.
Yeah.
It was just during the day, and I started recording this episode, and the doorbell went in the room, and was like, fuck, I forgot I ordered a drink, and I was midway through this episode, and went to the door, got the drink, came back, and I was like, what? I was obviously not thinking super clearly, but at the time I was like, what, fuck it, let's just leave it in. Who cares? And did the rest of the episode, and obviously after having one or two, maybe more drinks, I was probably a little bit more relaxed than usual, but I was just myself. And I remember after I published that episode, a really good friend of mine messaged me and said, mate, I just listened to this episode. In my opinion, it's the best one you put out so far. Not because of what happened, but purely because you were much more yourself. Like, if you and I had a conversation, this is what it would be like. And he was really honest with me. He's like, all the other episodes are great, but you don't really show any of your personality. You kind of make it too much about the guest, and it's almost like 21 questions, not so much an interview and a free-flowing conversation. So after that, I was like, what, I'm just going to I've always, even with Instagram and stuff, taken pride in being really authentic with what I share and showing my personality, and also not trying to make things look super glamorous, like showing the highs and the lows and just being myself. So I was like, I need to make that change, and that's kind of the catalyst for what made that change. And one of the most common bits of feedback I get today on the show is the fact that people really enjoy it is because it's relatable and because I'm just myself. And when people meet me in person, it's like, you're exactly the same as what you are on the show, and that's what I want. So that was the change, and I'm so glad I did. And now it's just so relaxed. Like when I record the solo ones at home and stuff like that, I'll have like the dog barking in the background, or someone vacuuming outside my room or whatever. And it's just, it is what it is. And as you mentioned, like similar to a YouTube channel, I think you can really build trust with your audience because they feel like they get to know you personally. And for me, that's great. I want to be able to help people, but I also want to make sure that what I share online or in person is exactly the same.
I think the one mad part to that is like, it's actually really scary to be seen for who you are.
Yep.
Yeah. Because then people like see you and know you. And I find that like, I don't know, so many people just like put on masks of like being afraid to be seen. Have you ever experienced that?
Definitely. And I was only talking about this the other day. Growing up, I was super anxious, super shy, but also very much so a people pleaser.
This people pleasing thing gets me motivated because this has come up so much in my world recently of 100%. Just like really highlighted how much tall poppy syndrome is just like destroying Australia and like New Zealand in all these different ways, just like coming up with insider. So I'm just like pumped to have this conversation. Yeah. So what was your journey like out of people pleasing, or how does it sometimes still show up? Because oh my God.
Yeah, I think definitely it still kind of shows itself every now and then, but I think the difference now is that I have the self-awareness and the experience and the knowledge to catch myself out when I'm feeling like that. And I'll give you an example in a sec, but yeah, growing up, I pretty much did everything to try and fit in, to try and, stay with certain friends groups, to try and
like what
play the part, to play the identity. Like, it definitely wasn't bad, but I definitely experienced certain parts of like bullying growing up. And I always felt like, whether it was within sport, I grew up basically basing my whole life around basketball and football. So whether it was being part of a group, whether it was being part of a friends group, I always felt like I was like on the fringe of being part of the group, right? So I would do anything I could to make sure that I could stay in that, right? And it got to probably maybe year 11, year 12, and I'm not sure what it was. I think through a lot of failure that I had with basketball, like I was fortunate to play at a really high level, but at the same time would miss out on all the state teams, would get cut from certain things, had a lot of setbacks with sport, but I don't know why, for whatever reason, but I just built up this resilience and like this fuck you attitude of like, I don't care how many times you tell me no, I'm going to keep coming back. I'm going to work harder than the next person. I'm going to keep showing up and you can't get rid of me. Like I'm coming back. And I think that mentality allowed me to get to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm starting to see through a lot of the facades of like, hang on a second, this is not like normal, like this is disrespect. And I'm like, I don't want to be disrespected anymore. And that was the point where I was like, you know what, I need to show up myself. I need to do what makes me happy. I need to stop giving a fuck about fitting in. I need to stop giving a fuck about doing something to try and please someone else, because when I had this taste of like happiness from doing what made me happy, that was all I needed. And that's what really started to change my mentality around being a people pleaser and trying to fit in. And I just kind of gradually let go of it. And then fast forward 2 or 3 years, stepping on stage for the first time, that was like that was like running through the banner at the end of the marathon. That was just like, I do not give a single fuck what anyone else thinks, because I've just done this big scary thing that none of my friends had done. No one even really knew that I was interested in that. Got completely vulnerable, stepped on stage, did something I'd never done before, and it gave me the most incredible feeling. But at the same time, I had a really good response from everyone who actually mattered to me, and there was no pushback. And I think that was when I also realized that, like, I said this to a client the other day, it sounds really blunt, but no one gives a fuck about you and what you're doing, because everyone else has their own problems, they have their own life, they have their own focuses, and it's an ego thing if you think people are sitting at home or on their phone going like, hey, did you see what Corey posted? I can't believe like he used that filter. I can't believe like I can't believe he fucking like took a photo with his shirt off, or I can't like no one gives a fuck. No one gives a fuck. Yeah. And when I had that realization, I was like, fuck it, let's go. Like let's and I saw the good things that were happening for me. I saw the difference in my happiness when I was doing that. And then it allowed me to really let go of it. And that's what kind of changed it all.
It's pretty insane when you have that fear of like of judgment or something else. Mm-hmm. And then when you actually be yourself and have the feedback of everyone just celebrating you and being like, congrats, good job. Like, I wish I had the courage to do that. Or like, I really acknowledge you for that. It's like a bit overwhelming, hey?
It is. And at the same time, I understood the importance of letting go of the people who aren't cheering for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not so much cheering for you. It's like, I don't need people to cheer for me.
Yeah.
But it's
but I like it.
Go on. No, but at the same time, what I mean is that like, all right, if I'm putting in this effort to try and be friends with someone or to please this person, but they're putting in no effort on the other side, then why would I continue wasting my time on this person when they're not in my corner? So it weeds out the people and the things that aren't serving you, and it allows you to live authentic to yourself. And just the other day I was talking to a client about this. It's like you understand like true happiness, you understand purpose when you show up yourself, because if you're not showing up your authentic self daily, you're basically playing a part in someone else's movie or playing a part in someone else's show. You're turning up as an actor every day. And that's what causes anxiety. That's what causes imposter syndrome. That's what causes all these issues that you think you have. But the reason why these issues are arising is because you're not being yourself. Like you're showing up feeling like you need to do something which is not you. So of course you're going to have anxiety and stress around it. It's like fucking... it makes so much sense when you have some perspective on it, but it's hard to get that perspective if you don't have someone in your corner being able to tell you that, or if you don't go through something yourself and have like that wake up call. So when I look back now at, in particular, like I am extremely grateful for the difficult times I had as a basketballer, and even like getting bullied and all that type of stuff. Like I am so grateful that I had those experiences, because it shaped me into the person I am today, but has also allowed me to share that perspective with other people that potentially are going through the same thing.
Makes it so relatable.
Yeah.
Or Peter Crone quote, don't become perfect because you have no one to relate to.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And coming back to what I said before, like podcasts, social media, whatever, it's just like vulnerability is a superpower.
It is. You'd be courageous to be vulnerable though.
You do have to be courageous to be vulnerable. And I think for a lot of people who struggle with that, it's not like you don't have to come out and tell everyone your deepest fucking fear. And I think that is powerful, but at the same time, like vulnerability plays out in so many different ways. And who was it? I was listening the other day. I really wish I remember who it was. Anyway, might have been Gabby Bernstein. No, it wasn't. It was
awesome
India
person.
Vine. Do you know India?
Yeah, I do actually. It's so funny. She went out
Amazing.
to dinner with Chloe, like my partner. It was like Friday night or something. Didn't know who she was. She was like, we went out dinner, India and all these other girls. We had like the best time ever.
Amazing.
She said she was amazing. Yeah.
India, yeah, she's incredible. And she was saying on a call the other day, she was like, it's easy to be vulnerable. It's easy to be vulnerable sometimes when it's about things that you know people are going to have sympathy for you for. It's hard to be vulnerable when things are good, right? Like when you're seeing success or when you're happy, it's hard to show vulnerability on that side of things where you can say, hey, I feel fucking great. Like I'm so happy. Like things are going really well for me at the moment, because you then have that fear of like people not being able to relate or people not being able to show sympathy for you. It's like, it's kind of easy to show vulnerability when you know someone's going to be like, oh, you're all right. Or like, I'm here for you, blah, blah, blah. And it's easy for people to relate to that and to get around other people, but it's hard to show vulnerability the opposite way.
I love that.
Yeah.
So much.
So powerful.
Because so scary. Like even with some of my friends back at home, because I'm originally from Adelaide.
Yep.
I was like, oh man, I haven't like seen and brought out with them for a long period of time, and I get a little bit scared of being like, when I'm telling them about all my wins and my success and all the things that are happening, I'm like, oh God, I get a little bit nervous like thinking about it. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. One question I did want to ask you though, was, did you ever feel guilty for like having people, like having to like sort of like let people go or have them like not come with you?
I think so.
Well, not really. You just
Yeah. Nah. It's not like that. Like, it's not so much guilt. I think there is a bit of guilt there sometimes, but it's hard, right? Because I think when I look at it with perspective, I've made so much progress and I've had so many wins, and it's amazing, and I'm so grateful for it. But at the same time, and I'm sure you would understand this feeling, it's like you always have this feeling that you're capable of so much more. So without the perspective, you're sitting here going like, oh, I haven't really achieved anything yet. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's a hard one. I've been really fortunate to have a lot of people around me who are always kind of like happy for you and do support you and stuff. But at the same time, you have to, the more I've learned about like energetics and stuff like that as well, that's when I've really started to take it more seriously. And it's not like, it's hard to have conversations even with clients when you got to tell them like, all right, well, you realize that your biggest problem right now is you're spending too much time with this person, or the people that you go and hang out with on the weekends are actually taking you 2 steps back every single weekend. And it's hard because, you know, you don't necessarily have to cut people off completely or whatever, but it's like you need to protect your energy and start to put time and energy into the things that are aligned with what you say you want. Because in the end of the day, like, that's your responsibility. And I think for a lot of people, it's just an excuse and almost like playing into the on a smaller end of the scale, I guess, like the victim mentality. It's like, you know, well, it's just victim mentality a lot of the time. But people have the power to make these changes. It just takes, as you said before, it takes courage and responsibility. Responsibility is the biggest one. People don't take responsibility for their outcomes, good and bad.
Yeah, and to go searching for it.
Exactly.
Part, especially like when, you know, the victim mentality, I swear that thing hides.
Yeah.
It like hides so far, and you got to like actually dig and be searching for it on like a consistent basis.
And it becomes, as you know, it becomes part of who you are as a person. It's just like you embody the victim mentality without even understanding it. So for you to get perspective on it, obviously it's quite hard because you don't see it as something you're choosing to do because it's programmed into you now. It's something that you've shown up and done so consistently that it's just part of who you are. So, you know, any change requires you to obviously, one, step into the unknown and step out of the comfort and the known and you know, get familiar with what, like, step out of the familiarity.
Familiarity? Is that the one? I was going to say that. I was like, God damn that word.
Step out of that and have some perspective, and that it's hard. You got to be super honest with yourself, and that's what a lot of people struggle with. You know, I was talking with the client last week about aligning like their actions and their behaviors with what they say they want. And, you know, for so many people, we look at what we can add in to achieve more. But for a lot of people, they need to actually do a stock take on what they've got and get rid of a lot of shit, a lot of time they spend doing things, places they're going, people they're spending too much time with, and mindsets and you know, thoughts that they're having over and over again. People are just becoming like a victim to their own thoughts instead of observing their thoughts, which is fucking hard to do. It's easy in theory, but hard in practice. But you need to have that perspective, otherwise not much changes.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think like with the whole comfort zone thing, it's like it always catches you. Like
100%.
Like every single level, you're like,
well, it feels good, right?
You're like,
it feels good.
Oh,
it's like, cool. it's funny. It's because we obviously chase. I don't know if chase is the right word, but we desire happiness and joy, and in a way we desire comfort. That's why we do things to get comfort and happiness. But then having the understanding and the ability to understand that once we get to that point, it's then time to then get uncomfortable again to be able to achieve that next level of happiness or joy or comfort. So it's just like a fucking never-ending battle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. One thing I like to talk on that as well, sometimes like the comfort zone, like for some people is like, take a day off.
Yeah. Yeah.
They start fasting because that was me. Yeah. Right? Like, but I like, take a day off. No.
Yeah. Fucking alright. It's what do you find at the moment, like for yourself, like what's your kind of like idea of comfort? Like where do you kind of cut yourself out, like when you're choosing comfort over growth?
Yeah. Big time is, I found this out sort of recently. It was like, I had to ask myself this question. Who am I when I'm not leading or coaching?
Mm-hmm.
That was like the big question I had to ask. Like, who am I when I'm not leading or coaching? Because like every good leader is a good student.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there was parts and places where I've just taken on so much responsibility. I wasn't showing up. was like a good student. I was just this, like delegating, moving things around, and not necessarily trusting. Like I delegate and then I'd go do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? So it was all this like comfort zone of just like trust and surrendering as a leader, and I've been moving through
control thing.
Yeah, like a control thing. Yeah, and I get that from like my mum and my dad.
Yeah,
like, that's just like so ingrained. So I went through this like period of time over the past, I would say, the past 3 weeks.
Yeah,
of just like I got like two amazing employees and a coach, and I've just been like, I can't do this all by myself, right?
Yeah.
Like I literally can't.
Yeah.
So it's just been like passing responsibility over them and like using, I would say, leadership that wasn't taught at university and wasn't taught at leadership training and wasn't taught all the stuff that I learned when I was like in corporate and stuff, like a different form of leadership, and like using that and like really letting go and supporting and empowering other people. And now we're having a joke. I'm like, I literally don't know what I'm doing during the day. I ring people up like, all right, I feel like busy and I'm productive and I need to get something done. Yeah. What do I got to do? Yeah. Very good. Like, what am I doing in my calendar? And like, just do this one thing today, Corey. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then I'll like,
it's hard to let go of that control, isn't it?
Oh, but yeah. And now it's kind of like, yeah, it's cool that it's sort of coming in. So it's like, I'm just trusting and letting other people know that's like, okay, they've got your back and they do these things. And but like as well.
And it's empowering for them too. Yeah.
It is, which is crazy. And then sometimes it's like stepping into the point, like getting like, turn of vulnerability. Sometimes I feel like an idiot who's doing nothing, who has these amazing people doing these things. Like, am I worth that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I just feel like, and this has only been the past couple of weeks. Like, well, I feel like some ditzy dickhead who has no idea, like has no direction.
Yeah.
And then when I come in and look at my stuff, I'm like, oh, this is actually really organized and we're good to go. There's just a lot going on that I have to rely on people for instead of systems. Yeah. So I go to a person like, hey, what am I supposed to be doing? Or what's this thing? Where are we going with that? And they're like, yep. Hey, what is it doing this thing and that? So, and it works.
That's cool. And I think, because I feel like a lot of the time the initial thought process is like, all right, well, by me stepping in, I'm actually helping this person. But what you don't take into perspective is like, in their mind, they're thinking, well, he doesn't think I'm capable of this. Like, he doesn't think that I have the value to offer to him, which is why then he's kind of taking control. And it's a hard thing to think of. Like an example of that was, and this is actually not the same as that, but similar. We were talking before about how my Kelpie Russ, he got really sick, right? And so we got him, he came off his ventilator like on a Saturday, sorry. We got to pick him up on a Sunday. And then Monday I flew out to Queensland for Joe Dispenza's retreat. So me flying out and then my partner having like this responsibility to take care of Russ for like the week, which was like constant care, and at the same time still like having a bit of a cloud over like whether he's completely healthy and stuff. For me leaving, I had all this guilt and anxiety around stepping away and not being there to help and whatnot. And I got to the airport and I bumped into a friend of mine, Emma Murray. I don't know if you've met Emma before. If not, I'll have to connect you guys because she's incredible. And so she's a high performance mindset coach, and we ended up sitting next to each other on the plane, which was just like a crazy synchronicity, right? And we're sitting there, and we'd been chatting about the fucking week that I'd just had, and we're sitting, and she could kind of she's very good at reading energy, and she was just like, she's like, you're feeling guilty, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, I feel guilty because I'm not there. And at that point, I'd been messaging my partner saying, I'm so sorry, I'm not there. Like, do you reckon I should just cancel? Should I just come back home? Blah, blah, blah. Like, this is not fair but on you, blah, blah, blah. And she just had this conversation with me, and it was like a light bulb. She was like, what you're doing at the moment is basically saying to her that you're not capable of looking after him for the week, and that you don't value her power, and you don't value like her responsibility to take care of him because you're not there. So you're saying you have more value than what she does. And I really obviously hadn't thought of it like that. And she's like, you need to get rid of this fucking guilt. Stop apologizing every time you talk to her, and instead show gratitude for the fact that she's doing it, because this is like her time to step up and show her power. It's her time to step up and show that she's capable of this, and that's going to empower her as well. And I was just like, fuck. Like, it's selfish of me to be sitting here feeling bad for fucking leaving. Here I am thinking I'm selfish for leaving, but I'm being more selfish by basically saying like, I should be there because you can't do it. And that's not what I was thinking, obviously, but that's like how it plays out. That's like the energy that you're throwing off.
Oh man. Shouldn't the giver give thanks to the receiver for receiving?
Yeah. I was just like, wow, you've just fucking mind fucked me before we've left. Yeah.
Yeah. Just crazy. Did you end up being able to like enjoy the event?
Yeah, I did. There was a couple of other things that happened throughout that week, which threw some spanners in the works.
That was supposed to happen for that week? Or
yeah, well, that was one of the things I took away from that week. I'm like, all right, because leading into that event, I'd tried to minimize stress as much as possible. Hadn't gone out for drinks and stuff as well leading into it, because I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm pretty much just primed and ready to go into this nice and relaxed, coming to this week with the perfect environment and mindset. And, the week before, have the absolute week from hell, and I'm like, fuck, and then go there, and then, I had my own kind of struggles within the meditations and the expectations I had and the mindset I was carrying into these meditations. So I was taking away so many lessons, but as the week went on, and there was just kind of one thing after the next that kept happening, and I was just like, I almost felt like this sense of surrender and peace to the fact that like, this is just a test. Like, this is a test, and it got to the point where I'm like, fuck it. Throw anything at me. I'm like, it couldn't get any more difficult than this. And I'm like, it's kind of, this all happened for a reason. And I think when I look at it now, I definitely got more out of that week because I was under so much stress and because there was so much going on than what I would have if everything was kind of all peachy coming into it. So it all happened for a reason, yeah.
It's like the whole world was just like, how present can we test him to see how present he can get when he's under heaps of pressure?
Meditation? Take this, motherfucker.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. And try not to think about this for the entire meditation.
Exactly right. Yeah, fucking crazy.
I've been thinking about this recently. I'd like to know like your thoughts on it. And I think like a lot of the personal development stuff, all the mindset stuff, like going to Joe Dispenzas and like going into the events and investing into yourself is, we have to just think about it. I'm like, it's like adult play. You know what I mean? Because it's like when we were kids, it's like, I feel like people were real serious about playing. They're like, don't you come in here? I'm like, there's the kings and the castles or whatever over there. And like, you're like serious about playing. Yeah. And then as an adult, it's like, we sort of lose that, I guess, until a lot of people have kids or something. So, I'd just like to hear your opinion on how playing in like modern adult playland, like, and learning about yourself and actually taking lessons away from it has like benefited you.
Heaps. Like, one of the main lessons I kind of took from, and it comes back to what I said before about change. Like, as you would know, so many people are just on like autopilot, just living the same program day in, day out. And it's just like, we don't even really, we're pretty much just subconscious about the stuff we do day in, day out. And everything is very structured and based off time and you need to be here at this time, do this at that time. Like, we know what to expect. It's the known. There's like for most people, there's not much unknown in their life. So, spending the week at this retreat, for example, it's like all of a sudden, which I found hard to do the first couple of days. It's like, right, forget about everything else. Forget about the typical familiar story that you have day in, day out, the familiar schedule that you have day in, day out. It's like, we're here, you need to become super present, and it's just time to like learn. It's time to experience new things. It's time to step into the unknown. And it's like, there's 1,000 adults like in this room, super uncomfortable, stepping into like this unknown feeling, this unfamiliar experience. And that's where like so much growth happens. So that's what I found when I came back is that first week back was quite difficult. And but you also have this realization that like, fuck, everyone's just like in their own little world. Like, but at the same time, it's just so familiar. It's like, it just makes so much sense as to why people, even if they have an outcome that they don't necessarily like, even if it's a negative outcome, it's comfortable to stay in it because they know what to expect. It's like people never, ever, ever get vulnerable, put themselves in an uncomfortable position in the unknown and allow themselves to actually, as you said, like play, learn new things, experience new things and see what else there is, because we just have this idea of like what life should look like or what it has to look like for us at the moment, because this is what we do for work, this is what relationship we're in, this is where we live, this is what our financial situation is, whatever it may be, and it just becomes safe even if it's shit.
And then you die at 25.
Yeah, it's just like, what the fuck? And then like the week at this event, I'm just sitting there going like, fuck this, like getting to this point where it was really uncomfortable, getting into this environment.
When was it really uncomfortable for you? When we were just like,
fuck, like every day, like
every second.
Day one, like I'd been meditating for like 45 minutes a day leading into it, because in my mind, I did one of Joe's online courses, and the 45 to 55-minute meditations in that course, that was like a stretch for me to go that long, because I would typically meditate for like 20 minutes. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to make sure that, you know, I come into this prepared, like no shock to the system. So I'll meditate 45 minutes a day, every day leading into it. And then day one, we meditated for 6 hours. And I left it and I'm like, fuck, like this is going to be interesting. So we're meditating 3 times a day. We did 36 hours across 6 days.
Whoa, that's a lot of meditation.
A lot of meditation. So you pair that with the fact that sitting in a room, literally like chairs right next to each other, you don't know basically anyone else. Sitting there from, you know, we were starting our first meditation at 6 a.m. and we were leaving the venue at like 7:30, 8 p.m.
It's a big day.
Meditations, lectures, presentations and stuff. So physically it's uncomfortable as fuck, because I don't sit down a great deal throughout the day anyway. So already it's uncomfortable, and then you're kind of coming into this meditation where it's going for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, which is also uncomfortable. And then stuff comes up. It's like, you know, the biggest lessons I took wasn't like, I came into it with an expectation of this experience I was going to have, this feeling I was going to have based off the energy in the room of like 1,000 people trying to become the best version of themselves. But what comes up is like all of the areas in your life that need work and attention, and the shit that comes up in this meditation is what correlates to what the areas that you need to work on in everything else in your life. So that's uncomfortable. But for me, like, I just remember the first kind of key moment where I'm like, fuck, this is epic and I need to try and put myself in more positions like this, is the first day we did the walking meditation.
Everyone went for like walking around the room or some shit, or like
on the beach. So it's 6 a.m. on the beach. We had, as I said, 1,000 people on a public beach. It literally, like, if you had have gone past, you would have thought it was a cult or like the fucking apocalypse or something.
Is it not a cult? Like
not a cult. So we had like, it's a mixture between standing with your eyes closed and then just walking almost like in a trance. But I was walking in part of the meditation, and I'm just like looking around and I'm just thinking like, this is insane. Like, there's 1,000 people here. Everyone is an adult. Everyone, you know, you've got people here who are running companies. You've got people here who have kids. You have people here who are like maybe struggling with where they're at the moment or whatever. And everyone is here for the purpose of becoming a better version of themselves. And they're here because they chose to be here. And it was just this incredible feeling. And I was like, fuck, like if more people could experience this and more people could put themselves in this position and this feeling of discomfort, but then also see what's on the other side of that, like the world would be a much better place.
It's just so powerful, hey?
Yeah, it was.
Did you come back really powerful? Were you?
I did, and I came back with a lot of lessons and
what did you have to work on? I'm just interested. Like, what were the things as well that you had to?
Yeah, so that was the biggest thing I took away, is that I come into too many things with expectation.
You're just in the ceremony the whole time, weren't you?
Too much expectation, like good and bad, and it was just perspective I had. So I think first one was coming into something with expectation, which then often led to not getting that result. So like in a meditation, for example, if I was coming into it trying to have this, you know, forcing the outcome of having this experience, I wouldn't have it. The meditations where I was either super tired or I kind of got to the point where I'm like, fuck it, let's just sit in it and whatever comes up, comes up. That's where I did have like really transformational experiences or feelings. And judging, I think coming from like a competitive background and even within the business and with competing on stage or basketball, whatever it was, after the meditation, I would judge it as a win or a loss, or like progress or no progress. But I really walked away with it just having the understanding of, you know, the similarity between lifting, right? You can't go to the gym twice, you know, your second time in the gym and leave there expecting to look like Arnold the next day. So why the fuck am I doing a meditation but then finishing there going like, oh, well, that was a waste of time because I didn't have this experience? It's like when I go to the gym some days, I may not be the best workout, but I know it's money in the bank. It's an investment into myself, and that compounds over time. So I may not see the results this week or next week or even next month, but in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, if I've continued to show up, I've continued to tick the boxes I know I need to do, I've made progress, invested in myself, regardless of whether they were 6 months of amazing workouts or 6 months of 50-50, I still showed up and ticked the box. And in time that compounds. And it's the same with meditating. It's the same with everything. It's like I need to come into things, show up, do the best that I can, and then move on and not get fixated on whether or not this was good or bad or progress or no progress. Like it's all just compounding over time.
How did you like relate this and like turn all these lessons and use them in business?
I was journaling every day. I also recorded a couple of solo like podcasts off the back of it, but I would take notes as the day went on, but at night time when I got home, I would sit there and kind of like look at the notes and start to look at where that correlates with other areas as well. And again, coming back to almost doing a stock take on myself and my business and then starting to see the crossover, right? So I'm like, all right, well, if I'm trying to force this outcome and I'm fixating all my energy on this result, but then at the same time I'm missing maybe the science in the universe, or I'm missing the enjoyable parts along the way, all because I want this result. It's the same as, if I'm launching like a new program and all I'm fixated on is how many people are going to sign up. And all of a sudden it's like I had a perfect example the week I got back. I did have that this mindset program I was running for like 4 weeks, and I didn't get the amount of signups that I kind of would have hoped for. But at the same time, I just had this lesson. I'm like, you know what? I need to show up with the same energy as if I had 10,000 people in this program, even if there's 10, right? And I need to make sure that I'm offering them the exact same service. I've got the same energy and I'm on the same vibrational frequency as if it had already happened, coming back to the old thinking, acting, behaving and feeling as if your dream outcome is already a reality, to make sure you're on that same frequency. And, 3 weeks into this program, I hadn't promoted it once for 3 weeks, and I had 4 or 5 people reach out in a week saying, hey, that program you're running, do you mind if I sign up now? Or like people randomly purchasing it that week. And it was all because I'd just let go of the outcome. I'd surrendered to whatever happens, and just understanding again that this is all compounding. Like it may not be where I want it to be now, but similar to the podcast, if I just keep showing up, at some point in time, this is going to pay off.
The whole discipline thing shows up again.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy as well, like being in the position of being a coach and being someone who is mentoring others and teaching others, like all the skills that you've learned, is it's like you also get like hit the hardest. There's like,
fuck yeah.
like you get hit the hardest.
Yeah. And but it's funny, you almost start chasing it. Not chasing it, but you have an appreciation for it. Like when I was going through that week, the fucking 1 or 2 weeks, the last month has been pretty tough, to be honest. But it's like, it's such a different perspective now. I'm like, there are so many things that I can take from this. And it's a test. And don't get me wrong, you still have times where you just feel shit, or you still have, it's still hard. It doesn't make it easy. But you just know that there's so much growth that comes from this.
Yeah.
You have to have that resistance. You have to have that, the difficulty there. Otherwise there is no growth.
Yeah. And I think like a real important part to add on to that is like also being aware of like what you're attached to.
100%, man. And that's something I've always been bad with. Not bad with, but like the attachment side of things and letting go of that attachment.
Like what for you?
Everything, bro. Fucking everything. Like I've got a lot better at it now, but attachment to results, attachment to identity around certain things, attachment to people, like even simple shit. Like it sounds ridiculous, but attachment to my partner. It's like obviously I want to spend the rest of my life with my partner Danielle, and I think she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But at the same time, it sounds ridiculous when you kind of say it out loud, but it's like I have to be okay with her not being there at the same time, because otherwise I'm putting all of my happiness on something that I have no control over.
Yeah. You're going to be aware of that all the time as well. Sometimes you're like,
yeah.
Oh.
and it dictates and determines like the way you react and respond to basically everything.
Yeah.
So it's just attachment, bro. It's fucking hard.
Yeah, like sometimes it's numbers, sometimes it's people.
Numbers, people.
Because when you said expectations, I was like micro triggered. I was like, oh, there's some expectations somewhere hiding from me. I was like, where they at? I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to look at that later, Daniel. God damn.
It's man. There's just so much.
Yeah, and it's like it's a lot of responsibility to have and to hold. I find like as well as like you would notice, one thing that I just really respect coaches and people that are like in the industry, like working their asses off, because you know that like and being in it yourself is, it's like regardless of how many people you talk to or what you learn or how you're showing up in your own life, there's kind of like there's almost cameras all on yourself because you've put the cameras there.
Yes.
Because and it's like every time you do something that's out of action or out of this or whatever it is, you're like, oh, I'm looking at myself here. And then if there's space here with a client or space there with a friend or whatever it is, it's like, I got to hold this and I got to hold this. And there's this attachment thing here which I'm attached to and I got to hold this and then like figure it out while I like try to unravel the damn thing. Because at the moment I'm like just holding on to it instead of letting it be.
Yeah. It's
Crazy.
a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. Like, what's your sort of process of using that, holding on to that, or like, cleaning your own energy and protecting your own energy with it before, as you mentioned it?
It's definitely something that I'm working on, to be honest. It's not a strength of mine. And it's something that I'm like really starting to get some awareness around now. And I think as well, like spending a lot of time in the fitness industry, you have this realization, you get so much perspective on like how much in particular, like we feed off other people's energy as well. It's like, even now, like I'm taking a lot more responsibility around what I say no to, like where I spend my time and energy, like who I give my energy to, what I give my energy to, and trying to pick up on it. Like I'm definitely haven't perfected it, but it's now at the point where I have enough awareness around the fact that like I can call myself out on shit a lot quicker and be like, you know what, you know what you're doing now. You know this is the program that wants to come up, but if this is going to change, you have to call yourself out on this shit right now, identify it, figure out what the underlying reason is why, and take some responsibility for either one, not putting yourself in that position and that situation again, or if you're going to, like, what are some better ways that we can deal with it and handle it now?
Yeah,
in the time that's happening, and I think working like mentoring people as well, not only just like coaching people for fitness, but like mentoring as well. Like I get so excited about mentoring calls or meetings and stuff like that, because I'm like, I walk away with it always just going like, fuck, I've learned so much myself by like helping someone identify what they need to work on. Throughout it, I'm just thinking to myself, like, as soon as this is done, make sure you write this down, because this is shit that you need to work on, and this is stuff that you know that you need to help as well. So yeah, it's so insightful, and I think it's why it's so enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think as well, like one part to that for me is just adding on to that is like also just having the health and fitness there as a foundation, which is so good that it's just like, I think it's just such an ingrained part of your life because you've been like doing it so good and like so many different professional levels. So it's like, yes. One question I just want to like dig a little bit deeper in, because we're a little bit here and then we'll finish up, is like, where in your life have you felt unworthy?
Unworthy. Probably in relationships.
Why?
And I've gotten a lot better at it now, but it just leads to a lot of like insecurity, obviously, and not putting worth on myself. And I think I actually thought about this recently, as I had an event on the weekend with Gabby Bernstein, and we did this little practice, and it was all around like trying to look at the inner child and like what comes up, and what you feel like you need as a child. And I was very fortunate. Like, my parents are fucking awesome. Like, mum and dad are the best. They've always supported me. I think with sport in particular, as I said, the basketball side of things and the friends group side of things, when I thought about it the other day in this meditation, it all came back to like seeking like the belief from someone else, like the belief in me, or like the belief in me. Like, I just needed someone or something to believe in me. So then when someone did, it was like hard to understand why I was worthy of that, because I hadn't had as much of it. And as I said, this is not because of parents. This is purely because of experiences I'd had through friends groups, through not being appreciated, not having someone believe in me on something that I'd put all of my fucking life and energy into in terms of the basketball side of things. So even with my partner, Danielle, like and to this day, it still pops up a lot, but like particularly when we first got together, it was like, I almost couldn't grasp that something so good and someone so, in my eyes, so perfect or whatever, had this I couldn't like didn't have the self-worth there to like understand that like I just didn't feel safe because I constantly was like almost expecting or had this insecurity around me losing it, or like it just almost didn't feel real that someone like had this worth on me that I didn't even have on myself.
Yeah, and it makes you almost want to like avoid and like almost push it away unconsciously, and you're like, why can't I?
Yeah, or it works on both sides. I think for me it was like almost the opposite. It was like too much coming back to the attachment thing, right? It's like, fuck, I've got something so good, I just can't believe it.
Don't want to let it go. Yeah.
So on one hand, you're like overdoing it from like the attachment side of things, but at the same time, you're overdoing it from the energy of not wanting to lose it. Yeah, and that was what popped up for me a lot. So it was like my energy and my actions were based off the fact that I was doing everything I could to not lose it, instead of enjoying it for what it was and seeing it for exactly what it was. So then you're then giving this energy to the other person of like not appreciating the fact that they have like the love or the care for you or like the belief in you, because you're basically saying to them like, I don't believe you, I don't trust that you want to be with me or stay with me, or that nothing's going to happen, when they're not doing anything or showing anything to say otherwise. But it all just comes from your fucking self.
You got these stories.
It's fucking cycle, yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, but I definitely feel like I've grown a lot on that in particular.
Yeah.
And it just comes back from just doing the work and the more self-awareness and fucking being willing to look at the areas where you really need to work on yourself, which is just so hard to do for some people. But I think it gets easier as you start to do more of the work. You almost get to the point where you're looking for it. You're like, all right, show me the areas where I need to work on. Show me my weaknesses or the areas that I'm really lacking in, because I want to tackle them now.
And it's addictive.
Yeah.
Every time you get a new hit of those things, you overcome something else. It's like, it gets to be this good. Oh, I just moved through this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a game, right?
Yeah.
So which kind of leads to my next question, which I'm going to ask you. I've been asked this on my last few podcasts, and I think they're just great like questions. It's like, okay, well, because of all that, why are you worthy?
Why am I worthy? I think, firstly, because I think the answer I want to give is because everyone is worthy, and there is absolutely no reason why I'm not worthy, regardless of who I am, what I've done. I think everyone is worthy. The second thing is because I know, deep down, like my values and the person that I am is good. I know I come, like my intentions are good. My want and need to give service to other people is there. I think it's a tough question to answer. I just think that I genuinely was thinking about this the other day at this Gabby event, and I was thinking as to like why do I like deserve to be happy, or why should someone believe in me? And it's because there's no reason not to. Like I know that I've gone out of my way to make myself the best version of myself, and do the work to look at areas I can improve, to take responsibility for the good and the bad, and that I feel like I've got a lot to offer to someone else, but also just to the world. So I just think it just comes back to the fact that everyone is worthy. Like I'm worthy of everything.
Yeah, so true. And I think just like personally, of seeing you and like and getting to know you now, is like you've also just kicked ass, man. Like you've put yourself in the position and you've just kicked ass, and like that's what I see from you. And it's just like, hell yeah. And it's like thank you for leading by example for that, because that's what I try to preach in like all my communities and stuff. So it's like, thank you for doing that, man.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
No, like I really mean it. So I like to leave the listeners with just like a challenge from like this conversation that we've had, for something they can do today, tomorrow, this week, that based on that conversation that you think would be a good thing for them, that they can just like get up and do.
A challenge I think would be really good, and I found this very helpful when I did it, is to reach out to 5 people that you are close with, or at least like know you quite well, and ask them to give you the most honest response possible as to the things that they think you do really well, but then also the areas or the parts of you that they think you don't value in yourself, or that you need to put work into. And choose wisely who you ask, because you want to make sure and make it clear when you ask them that you want the most honest answer possible, and that you're not going to get offended. And this is not something that, you're going to take offense to. You're asking this because of the reason that you want to become better. And this is kind of like that first step to getting really vulnerable, because it points out the areas that you can work on yourself. And then from there, it's taking responsibility and putting in the work then. It's like you've had the areas addressed, and you may get different answers. The chances are you'll get pretty similar answers if they're people who know you well. And then it's up to you to do something about that.
Oh, straight up. And I think in that position as well, it's like you can do like 6 months to a year's work of like personal reflection and journaling and reading and trying to figure out stuff. And you could just ask people close to you, like, hey, honestly, where am I shit?
Yeah.
And it's like,
hey, tell me how shit I am.
Like, there's your work.
You have one person go, oh, thank fuck, about time you asked.
Yeah, I know. I've been waiting to tell you how shit you are.
Let me get out my list.
You're like, thank you for telling me how shit I am. Now I've got a real good list of stuff to work on. We'd like that. Yeah, we'd be like, oh, thank you. Tell me these things. But no, Danny, man, thanks so much for coming onto the show. So just before we leave, where can people find you?
2 places, probably the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast or my Instagram at DJK Fitness, and you'll find everything else there in terms of email list and all that stuff. But I appreciate you having me on, man. It's been really cool to connect, and hopefully the audience has taken some value.
Absolutely, and obviously everything will be linked down below. And now we're getting ready because we're swapping up here. So